Good evening, everyone. My name is John Taves, and I'm the event coordinator here at McNally Robinson Booksellers. Before we begin, I will acknowledge that McNally Robinson is located in Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene people, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. In addition, McNally Robinson Booksellers itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. We are here tonight in collaboration with our very good friends at the Winnipeg International Writers Festival to present this launch as part of Thin Air 2021. And of course, today we are gathered here to celebrate the debut poetry collection by Evan J., Ripping Down Half the Trees, published by McGill-Queen's University Press. Before we begin, I just wanted to go over a few very quick housekeeping notes. First of all, hello to everybody out there on YouTube. You will have a chance to interact with us over the course of the evening, so please do feel free to write whatever you'd like positively in the chat. And also, if any questions occur to you, you will have the opportunity to ask questions when we get to the Q&A portion of the evening. So please feel free to put those in the chat, and we'll make sure to monitor that and put your questions to Evan. Secondly, for all those gathered here physically in this space, we do ask that you keep your masks on while you are in this area. This is the performance space. As soon as we leave here at the end of the night for the actual book signing, we will be moving from the performance into the retail space. And so once you're out there, we just ask that you continue to wear your masks, but also begin to socially distance, as new requirements do take hold once we move beyond this barrier. Beyond that, the flow of the evening will be an introduction from your host, whom I will introduce in just a moment from up here, following which Evan J. will read some selections from the book. After that, there'll be a conversation at these tall stools to my left. And following that, there'll be time for the Q&A. When we do get to the Q&A portion of the evening, because it seems rather unreasonable to circulate a microphone through the entire crowd, I'll just ask you to put up your hands and ask me the question, which I will then relate into the microphone for the benefit of all those gathered here and for the benefit of all those watching at home. I will also gently ask you all to please ensure that it is a question rather than an extended statement or comment, not because we don't want to hear from you. There'll be plenty of time for you to talk to Evan during the signing line, but simply because my brain is porridge at this point and I will not be able to recall whatever eloquent things you have to say. But with all that, I will now get off the stage and allow somebody much more interesting to come up here. Your host for this evening, Teresa Horosko, is an emerging writer and zine maker living and working on Treaty 1 territory. A recent graduate of the University of Winnipeg's Honors English program, she works for several arts nonprofits in music, literature, and film, doing programming, event management, or operations management. Currently, she is part of the Thin Air programming team. Her creative nonfiction has appeared in Prairie Fire, and she has just published a limited run zine called Letters to John Goodman, an exploration in anticipatory grief. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Teresa Horosko.
Hi, you all look so lovely with your masks. Thanks for being here. It's okay, show of hands, whose first in-person poetry reading is this? Quite a few, like post-pandemic. Yeah, okay. Hi, I'm Teresa, and I'm here to host a conversation with Evan J. But first, let's talk a little bit about who Evan J. is. Raised in Manitoba, Evan J., he, they, now works and writes in the town of Sioux Lookout, Ontario. Evan is the fiction editor for Cloud Lake Literary Journal and runs poetry workshops in Treaty 3 territory as part of Valum's Poetry for Our Future program. For several years, Evan was the director of Slackline Creative Arts Series in Toronto, a series and collective showcasing emerging writers and artists from across Canada. Evan has been nominated for a handful of literary awards, including the CV2 Young Buck Poetry Prize and Subterranean's Lush Triumphant Literary Award for Poetry. Evan is also a previous winner of the Valum Award for Poetry. And during the day, Evan teaches digital literacy skills to Indigenous adults living in remote First Nations communities, which is a lovely bio. But I would also like to say that I've had the pleasure of meeting Evan several months ago now, and we often meet over Zoom to talk about books, which then quickly turns into talking about different issues within our world. And also, I think one of my most cherished memories is talking to you about improper city planning and the way that we need to be better for our communities. So I also wanted to say a little bit more that Evan, enjoys editing other people's work, consuming literature and art, finding places within nature, decolonizing, advocating for transgendered rights, helping operate the Sioux Lookout, Sioux Hudson Literacy Council's Adult Learning Center, a drop-in center for Indigenous adults experiencing homelessness and/or addictions. Evan J is so much, and I am so excited to be here to introduce him with his new debut poetry collection. I guess new and debut is redundant, but you know what I mean. His debut poetry collection, Ripping Down Half the Trees. So without further ado, come on up.
Right on. Oh, I can do this. Hi. We'll read one, and then I'll banter more. Of course, you do find spicy bits. Today is for the archive. It is religious and therefore lavish and habitually cleaned. I've heard that private libraries and repeat days underground are the process of book writing. So it's assumed I am poet. A boy propped over a century-old table in the history beneath a Montreal summer. The archivist interrupts by fingering a mini canoe reliquary upon the table between us. They don't get many visitors. It is a gift from France. A boat carrying brass box no bigger than fist holds the phalanges of Canada's saints, and the finger of Brebeuf angles towards me. I ignore the angel's gesture, a cliche vestige, and work to wrench open a res school record book. The Jesuits have been so kind to me. They've kept meticulous statistics since day one. There is a purity in their honesty that is cleansing or erotic, makes me nearly enter the house of solidarity. But instead, I steal knuckles. It is difficult to write with the hands of a saint. I've learned if you can break a carrot or fraternity, you too can break the pointer. Thank you. That's the first one. This for me, John? Yeah. Okay. We wrote that in Montreal. Right, we were working on a different book that didn't come to fruition, but working in an archive in the basement of the Jesuit building there in Montreal, and they actually had this weird finger on display in this canoe of Brebeuf's finger. It's a strange thing. Anyways, thank you so much for coming, all the family, and yeah, hi, all the friends too. My new friends. I was telling people all day. I have this crew of people, the three of you, that we've gotten to know each other digitally. It's the first time I've ever done that. Now I get to actually meet you in person. So that's a blast. I'm going to read maybe like 3 or 4, tell you a bit about them as we go through, and we talk about a few issues as we go through that. Yeah. One little story before you can get into that. I don't know, some like lit people might know this one. Did you ever hear the story about like Margaret Lawrence, who was like super nervous to read everything? And she finally got to read. Someone invited her to read at a bookstore in Toronto one time. And she was like shaking, couldn't come on stage. And so they brought her downstairs and like slipped her a Valium. And she came out and read for like 10 reading for like 2 or 3 hours. And it's like the best reading she ever did. Yeah. I thought that was so funny. I'm not that nervous anymore, but it's funny to hear her nerves. So the book is chunked up into 3 pieces. The first one's called The Metro, and it's containing poems that have settings that are a little less central to Northwestern Ontario, but still follow the same kind of like socially political angle lens. So I'll read one of those first, maybe a couple of those until we get into more regional poems. This one here, written after communicating with a family, an author. It's called Invaders, Mystery Space Riders, or an ode to Alan Kurdi. You arrive in past tense. You hold brother, mother, and all the pieces of your father's heart in your palming hands. You are buoyance, you are endurance, you are oil, a flame on the ocean, until every susurration is respired. To write this poem, tears must wet my fingers and spark a keyboard. I am shocked with every keying, but I've been taught never to move. Poets, we are cowards. We could not have helped you. We are the mortar jammed under words, submerged by bricks of language. We will not stop a tank or the terrorism of teeth, and our rhythm will not help you float. None of us could spot a fake life jacket from the real. We would all have died before you, but you should not have died. You should not have died, and we should never stop crying. You should learn what killed you. It was hope in the night lights of coasts only 4 kilometers away. It was wind in the tumult of that perilous strait. It was a hard boat still crushed in the waves. It was traffickers shit out of luck. It was your father with no other options. It was Poseidon erect and irate. It was Assad, Abu Fadi, al-Baghdadi, Erdogan, Obama, Putin. It was Harper, Trudeau, and electoral fisticuffs. It was a war most still don't understand. It was the 8,000 kilometers between us. It was the color of your toddler's skin. It was fear. It was me. It was and still is the inability to see your full face. This is an ode to a favorite child, using words that can't replace the waning scent of a sun. This is a poem for the guard boat I so wish had found you earlier, and for the hope that the captain could be a father. This poem should absorb every placed blame. It should place fruit on your grave. It should refute the 2-minute news that cuddled you. It should be more sorry. It should give you swimming lessons. It should take you back to a park with a jungle gym. This is a stark poem. It is not my place to clean you. The only intent is presenting your unfathomable beauty, a 3-year-old who could have ridden to moons. Ooh, yeah. I only it's taken 5-10 times of reading this for it to not be less of a poem and start to hit me as hard. Yeah, that one's super sad. I mean, it's a sad topic, so I guess it's a successful poem. But anyways, so the next few we're gonna transition into topics that were written a little more about. We call them Sioux Lookout topics. They're regional topics about small town Canada, or I don't know. I would also say regional because of the uniqueness of Northwest Ontario, just with the density of Indigenous people there versus settlers, and just the weird geographical layout of all the reserves and towns. And so the second half of the book is largely written about the problems that arise from all that stuff. Hi, Eric and Karen. I didn't see you come in. So the next one, I didn't think it was much of a poem, and one of my editors, Laurie Graham, took this poem in a really crappy format and told me to redo it and go deeper, and it seemed to go well, but she didn't comment too much on it after, which I guess was a good thing. I guess it was working. We moved on to other poems. It's called Colonialism for Dummies, and since the book released, it's one that I get tons of feedback on in a good way, of people saying, oh yeah, this is a great kind of response to what Laurie was doing in her books, and then also it's really important for settlers to hear. Colonialism for Dummies. Begin with missionary, then proliferate, and sprinkle children over the land. It's as simple as sex on foreign soil, and the babies will say, home, I was born here, call me native too. That's the terror of this ism. I mean the beauty. If the sights remain short, you can't see how you're weaponized. I mean complicit. Plus, the longer you occupy a parcel, the easier glory disguises your forebears' faults. You can call your ancestors' passage an invasion, I mean an exodus, a historic flight from poverty or famine or communist murder. Don't worry, the specifics don't matter. Blame fastens poorly to white folks. I mean, European immigrants. And take pride in this heritage. Call it identity. But be sure to vocalize your distance from the violent and oppressive acts. I mean, the harmless prejudices. Even if your insides too boil with the same arrogant hatred. Say, Grandma came here alone and with nothing. Which is a lie, of course, as she surely wasn't solo aboard that immigrant boat, and she obviously bore the offspring that bore you, and she always wore a light skin tone. Remain ignorant of this, or at least appear so. Use the phrase, the good old days, and different era, and never halt the infiltration, I mean copulation. Infants suggest innocence, but their muscles will build more suburbs. Remember the keys, blindness and expansion. If you stick to the plan, this brilliant strategy will thrive, will make racism, I mean cultural unrest, so legally translucent, you can shoot a Cree man in the head, I mean murder, and go unpunished. It's also really deep. I was lose track of time in this hard to gauge time. Where we at, John? Yeah, okay. I at least have two more. This next one is called Kingfisher Named Bear. I haven't actually read it out loud before until now. It became like just as fun at this point. It was like Facebook famous this week. It was so funny. Saul, it's for our MPP, Saul Memaqua, who works right beside my office in Sioux Lookout. And someone sent it to him and he shared it, and it just went over and over and over and went all over Facebook. It was funny as a poet to see that happen. So I'll read it. He stands in the park of a queen who tries to kill him. They expect him to sing a song that orders a foreign god to save her. They expect him to sing the song of a politics that accepts the annexation of land. They expect him to avoid a dialect because none have learned the tongue flip that honors water over leadership. He stands in the chamber and again explains he will only square to a labor strike or a pipeline fight when his children stop dying and the water returns. They expect him to smile. So yeah, well, Saul, I doubt you're watching, but that was for you. What was I gonna say? I guess maybe many Manitobans don't know this. Queen's Park is like the legislature. This is like the where they sit for provincial politics there. And one thing I thought I'd say as well, nobody caught this week as it went Facebook famous, because I imagine how many people know OG Cree, but this is the one poem that I made like a blatant error, a mistranslation error. This is a kingfisher named Bear. Bear is Makwa, and Mamakwa is butterfly. So this should be a kingfisher named Butterfly. Sorry. Yeah. They're so close, right? Makwa and Mamakwa, but my OG Cree is quite poor. I'll read one more that's a little, again, kind of in this thread of deeper emotional pieces that are hitting on some socio-political issues in Sioux Lookout and in the region. This one is called "To the Boy Pounding on Our Back Door at Midnight." I think when my dad read this, he's like, "Oh, did that actually happen?" And I was like, "Yeah, do you remember that?" Yes, it was like the first week we moved to Sioux Lookout, this happened, and I wrote a poem about it after. Yeah, kind of like bringing some of these intense, unique scenarios of homelessness and kids having to travel down for school to Sioux Lookout, bringing it literally to our doorstep. I cannot let you in. This phrase has undertone. It's uncomfortable and wreaths like the fists tumbling in your hoodie pouch. It contains venom like the drippings from your chin to the chest of your September orange sweater. Your eyes are vexed, and I judge there is a high probability of violence upon self or against others. My insinuations are staunch and startle me as much as your failure to hide from my porch light the minority in your damaged face. I know firsthand how shock can foxtrot a mind. I start our conversation with empathy and yell an apology through the hinges. Immediately, I feel the rebound, a reflection of futility cutting with the glow of my light skin, my foreign Canadian language, and my racism cleverly masked behind the deadbolt of safety first. On the phone, dispatch assures my harmless home is just another on a strip of hedgerow neighbors who've encountered you knuckling for nocturnal resolutions at back doors. We've all remedied your pain by howling to police. At your age, I doubt you can see all the barriers between your pleas and my medicine cabinet. So I demand that you meet me out front in the streetlight, but an officer finds you wedged between our side stucco wall and the fence post. When they finally wrench you free, you're casually escorted to the back seat of a cruiser. No cuffs, no rough stuff. I hear a cop assuring, "There'll be no jail tonight, son. We'll just patch you up and give you a lift home." You respond with the lifespan of, "Please don't." All right. I could do one more, and I'll call it there. Yeah, one more. Okay. And then we'll talk about a bunch of this stuff in more detail after. So I'll just knock off one that hopefully won't make Sharon cry. Cry any more than you already are. Sorry. All right, we'll go back to Gimli for all my Icelandic family. Again, in the first part here, trying to hit a whole bunch of like Gimli stereotypes here. So hold on. It's called The Violent Orange Hours. From the airport turned dragway, there's a summer weekend rumbling that's equal part funny cars to Hell's Angels Harley. The roar is the repute of Gimli, is the riff from the old ways, from volcanoes to flatlanders, from Althing to Turgesons, from Idas to coffee, black like sheep's blood. The shift is how marauders are made. Entrepreneurs, local born, from folks with amas who call wealth a smoked gold eye. It's why the plaster was laid for the seaside Viking statue and the Highway 9 motel bar, grimy with VLTs and cheap rye. This grand turn of capital gets called Icelandic pride, and you can smell it, like mash on the wind, like piles of fish flies rotting beneath a July lamppost. I know all this because my eyes and lines shadow a daughter of elves, swimming above zebras as the sun bursts its rise like a greenback from Lake Winnipeg's water. Icelanders must always swallow the violent eruptions of the orange hour and push themselves to opportunity in the waves past the ironwood of Willow Point. Yeah, thank you. I guess say one more thing. Yeah, one, of course, thanks so much for coming. We'll chat. I'll chat with you after. I'm gonna say it's what, 2021? I don't know if I told you this, Charlene. Maybe I did. It was 10 years ago. It was the first time I ever saw anybody read a poem. It was at the Winnipeg Festival. Professor Alison Calder said we could get extra marks if we came to the poetry reading, and we did, like three of us, and three of my friends and I, and yeah, I was at M2IP Theater there, and that was the first time I ever knew anybody could read poetry, and it was like a Christian book, reading like a bunch of vowels, and David O'Meara reading about cooking and something else, but it was life-changing for me, obviously, that first point. So thank you for that. And the second thing was like, that was 10 years ago. 8 years ago, first place I ever read, right here in a creative writing class with Melissa Steele, and she had us all up here read poems for the first time, and they were all terrible, right? We had all our friends and family out just to like see what it was like, and I didn't think anything of it then, but then like 3 or 4 years after that, I came back to it. It was right here. Strange. So thank you to the whole bookstore here and to all those people. Thank you all for coming. It's a big deal for me. So cheers. Yeah.
Hi. No, that's okay. Right there.
Right on. Testing.
Hi.
It was okay. It was okay. The reading.
I think
you're
so.
all right with it. Sorry to bring you all down. All these super sad poems, but
Hi. Wow. Thank you for that. That was something, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
that was something. Honestly, the whole collection is just amazing. So emotive. You had me multiple times in near tears, if not crying, but in some really beautiful ways too. You also have these moments of levity and these moments of beauty that I think your readers will be so thankful for. And also, you're kind of good humored in some of it. And I just really wanted to compliment you on being able to have both what's necessary and hard to read and hard to sit with, especially as settlers who need to really examine our place and what we can improve on. But also, having those moments of wow, that was so special. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Sharon. It's funny, and I hear that a lot, of course, now because that's kind of the purpose of the book. But it's funny as the writer, I think, oh, I totally didn't do it enough. As I read this today, I was like, half these poems, that didn't hit hard enough. As the creator, I see all the breaks of it, and I'm like, oh, it could have been better in this area. I could have done that better in these spots and made it do it harder. But
it's never going to be done,
never,
right?
Yeah, you hit that point as a creator, and you're like, okay, I just have to stop and send it to the publisher, right?
It's one of the last lines in the collection where it says, "You'll never be done with the night, but she can offer lamps." And then, bam, it's over.
I wrote that?
Yeah.
Where's that?
It's page 85.
Oh. It's funny. It's probably one of those poems where I read like the first line and I'm like, I'm never going to read that on stage. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like right at the end of page 85.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then there's one more poem after that. And you're just like, oh my God, that's it? That was just...
Right. Yeah.
So
that is one of the poems that I'm like, I'm like, oh, there's too much in that. I can't read that out loud, but for various reasons. But thank you for noting it. Sorry, ask away, whatever.
Oh no, I was just gonna actually kind of jump off what you were saying there. Where this is a poem where you're like, oh, there's too much here. I can't read it out at a reading. And so I'm not sure if any of you had the opportunity to flip through. You have so many different styles and so many different, style and form. I wanted to know if you wanted to speak a little bit about some of your choices within that.
I'm interested to talk to other poets about this as well, and I kind of have over the years, but the poets who are here, we can chat more about it after. But I find myself that when I'm in like a funk of writing, or when the poem's not working, I'm looking for a solution. I just pick up another book of poetry, look for something that works, and then try to copy it and riff off of it, and maybe mash two poems together or something. But I also find just in general that reading such an excess amount of poetry, I see so many things I like, and I'm like, well, that's going to work. I'm going to do that. That's going to work. I'm going to do that. And then you end up with a book that's a whole bunch of different things. Yeah. The one thing I would note, which was kind of profound to me in the editing process, is I never really wrote free verse, and I got a bunch. And the first time I got a note back from Lori, she was saying, oh, all of your free verse stuff actually hits really hard and it works great. And I thought, and then she said, consider it for other things. And then I created, 10 more. I took 10 poems that weren't working and tried that, and it seemed to solve it, which is fascinating. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And a very exciting learning experience.
It is.
Too.
Yeah. I don't know. I wonder with older poets have been doing it for several years, if that ever ends. Or if you just keep experimenting decade after decade. Yeah.
That's actually a great point for me to just bring up, that we will be having questions after. And if any poets in our live audience, as well as YouTube, have anything they want to add or ask, we'll encourage you to do so in a few more moments. Just, put your thinking caps on.
Okay.
And so you're obviously, as a poet, you read a lot. Read a lot. Are you reading a lot of political poetry? Because this is obviously political. You can't not read it and know where your values for the values of the poetic voice stands within this.
Yeah. Of course we are. I would say that I'm thinking, are we not? We almost don't read things if they don't try to make some immediate political action of some kind. If we look at our bookshelf, it's very heavily weighted of just like the big heavy hitting books in all of the contemporary popular social spheres right now. Race and gender and all these things dominate our bookshelf. So yes, absolutely. And yeah, and there is a fun realm. Me as a white settler writer is like trying to look for other white settlers like doing things decently good, or writing books that like, at least right now, that are like reflexive and take a look at like whiteness, and maybe whiteness within like a region of some kind, or maybe within gender of some kind. And so I say we, it's Jess and I, my partner Jess and I, reading down these like threads for a while and picking up a whole bunch of books down this thread. So yeah, we'll be looking for these things and read 5-10 books down that avenue. So yes, excessively reading. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that within your collection that you are not voyeuristic in the sense that like you're looking in and you're like, that's a problem over there that I'm not going to engage with.
Yeah.
And you or your poetic voice, you know, assumingly you does examine like places where you might have made a mistake. There's one poem you have where I guess the Adult Learning Center does not allow for a patron to come back in because they had a moment of violence, and you really reflect on whether or not that was the right call. And yeah, so I guess I just wanted to talk a little bit about where you think, what you think the role of, you know, the settler poet is in political writing, and yeah, if you can expand a bit on that.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. So I'm thinking about this a lot, like this week. These ideas of like what's right, and largely like what's right within like policy, and these like paradox that arise instantly, these conundrums, this contradiction. So my example from this week, some of my friends and family know this. So what is Saturday?
Yeah.
Thursday, I worked late, and it was kind of like a rowdy. I was there alone. It was a rowdy night at the Learning Center, and I guess either I forgot to lock the car or something. Anyways, I went to go home at like 7, and there was someone asleep in my back seat. And instantly I was like, oh shit, somebody's in my car. And then I was like, oh, okay, they're just drunk and asleep in the back seat. And then I ran immediately, the brain started clicking. I was like, oh, I'm in this paradox again. These are like, I couldn't see, but it's probably somebody I care about. But it's also like, there's like Sioux Lookout, there's weapons in the car because I'm a hunter, and I have a hunter in the car. So I want to like be safe with that. But I also like want to respect this person, and they also need a place to sleep because it's raining outside. And like I like them and I want them to sleep well, but I also want to go home. And it's like all of these things start to mash together, and it's so what do you do? And that's like a pretty good example of all of these scenarios I'm running into at the Learning Center, and our policies of like of trying to be safe and trying to respect people, but also trying to like give them the things they need when we can give it to them, and then like keep our mental health safe and keep their mental health safe. And these things don't necessarily always work out together, and you can't always achieve everything. And so essentially I'm just writing about these confusing days often of like, how are you supposed to grapple with all these things you want to do right, whatever right is. You know? Yeah. I kind of ramble, less of an answer, but
I loved it. Thank you.
Yeah.
That actually, now I'm going to give a little bit of an anecdote to kind of answer to that. I had some friends in this week from Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, and I was showing them around, you know, our beautiful here in Winnipeg, the river trails, and, you know, coming up along the encampments. And it actually made me think a lot of your poem, Note to the People Using Old Needles Stolen from the Public Bathroom. Yeah. Because while walking, we had a conversation about giving that encampment the respect it needed, as like that is somebody's home, and it might not be a home that we understand or a home that we live in, but giving people that necessary space. So I really did want to thank you. There, I think you even say it in your poem, but I'm ashamed I don't know how a home like this works. Yeah, and I'm probably going to write more of those. I'm encountering this like right now again this week is like it's fun. We put up boards to like keep people from using part of our courtyard as a bathroom. Because again, is it my job to clean up the bathroom? Not really, but where do people go to the bathroom? But it's turned out it's made like a little home there in our courtyard because it's got like 3 walls, and this time of year it like blocks the wind. So people are creating a home in it, as in like they're coming there. They're using me and what I can give them, washroom and food and water and stuff during the day. And then at night they've got like a system going on, and it's like, now I'm wanting to write, okay, so like what's my place in the system of their home? I'm obviously a part of it now, but I leave at night, and yeah, I know it's confusing what that home is. But yeah, we see it all over the city too, and I'm interested in what those dynamics are of that home space, because it's really important. It's somebody's life, how they live there. Yeah, absolutely. So
Anyways,
Yeah, so I think from what I'm hearing from you is that as writers and poets, we need to start kind of like
right.
working through those complicated feelings and like I don't want to say feelings, but working through those questions and figuring out, yeah, how to maybe rectify policy and also how we live and
that's just me, right? Like I just happen to be a poet, so that's just my way, right? There could be people out there who are like, I go home and paint every night. Someone will like paint this problem out on the page, or well, me as well. But other politicians are like, okay, I'm gonna like try to change policy to figure this out. But I also engage with our town policy a lot, just trying to again put in my perspective into that. But yeah, I don't know. That's kind of my answer for somebody who's coming to writing so privileged. Like I thank my family so much for giving me such like a comfy life, and now I have this like wealth of ability to help other people. And this is just like my attempt happens to be creative.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So how do you like balance the social justice and the artful? Is that a conscious choice going into writing a poem, or is it something that just happens naturally because you're just so good?
No, no, and I don't think. See, I read a lot of poems like, oh, that I should be more like lyric. I should use like I'm using every piece of craft I know. Like, how do I say this? Critiquing myself. I don't think that my work comes out as audibly beautiful as I want it to, though I'm using all of that craft. I'm purposely trying to use everything, right? Like tone and alliteration and cadence and everything, and have something sound beautiful. But I do find I shift the weight of what I'm doing towards like getting the idea out there. I end up sacrificing. In my critique of myself, I sacrifice too much of the song of the poem. So it's a fight all the time between those two sides of like trying to make something that hits somebody hard through their ear, but also hits them through its purpose. I don't know if I'll ever figure it out, but it's a fun thing. It's probably one of the more fun things to play with as a poet, trying to achieve both purpose and sound at the same time.
Even if you never find it out, figure it all out, I hope you continue to try.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's like we've talked about this, like our Winnipeg Writers Festival group a few times, talked about like a sound poet and how awesome that is. But I get into that. I'm like, well, it's so beautiful. I have no idea what they were talking about. But I still I really like that, and I often gravitate towards it just for its musicality. Yeah, I don't know where I'll shift. Of course, like by next week, I'll shift back to some other kind. But yeah,
I think one of your strengths that I noticed, and I can't wait for other folks to read and hopefully agree with me, is that just how conversational you are in some of your poems. And with the reading you gave us now, where you were talking, get my head on straight. I wish I wrote it down. When you're like. When you called someone a racist, and then you were like, "Oh no, actually, I mean," and then you say the more like PC term.
Right, yeah.
And so having those kind of like back and forth of like conversational colloquialism, I think really helps with your lyricism. I really enjoyed that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. Well, I often think that like who am I writing to, and instead of just like thinking about how they'll perceive it, I guess I've often thinking, why don't I take it a bit further and like anticipate how they think, which can be tricky as a writer. Anticipate how they think, like right to that reaction. But it is also fun, and it makes some fun poems when you play with, oh, how would somebody react? And that poem, Colonialism for Dummies, is that. It's like, what would like push against somebody who has never, like as a white settler or something, has never been pushed against before? And it's just a series of sentences that like nudge them. Yeah.
Okay, this might sound like an easy question, but I think it's really important. What would you want people to know who are just picking up your book? They haven't even cracked the cover. They haven't heard your reading. What do you want people to know about this book? What do you want them to take away from it? Right,
like what would I hope 10 years ago, Evan, seeing these people read for the first time? What would right? Because what did I'll reframe it. What did those poets do for me? Well, maybe I'll bring it back to that question of just like variety of poems in here. I hope somebody would read it if they were interested in the craft of poetry. I hope somebody would read it and say, oh, like a poem can be a lot of things. And that's another reason, bring it to another answer, like why I would want something more lyric as well. I would hope someone would be like, oh, I could like write a song as a poem, or I could write like a prose poem that's really long, and I can actually make a little difference in my community with my words in any of these styles. That would kind of be my goal. It seems to be, and I should say, it seems to be my goal when I encounter people in these small communities, when I talk to them about it. They're like, oh, this is really cool. And it's about my place. And I kind of know these scenarios. I'm in Fort Francis, but this happens to me here too, like that kind of thing. Yeah.
Have you had many opportunities to showcase this book in Sioux Lookout?
No, not at all. Small town problems, staffing problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's my plug every time I get on a mic is, this is a longer answer. That wasn't even a question you asked, but it's a longer response to it. There's a lot of problems everywhere, but small town problems, specifically if we're talking in these realms of colonialism and racism and stuff. Of course, language is really important, words are really important, and like how you criticize it is really important. But like on the ground, our biggest problems in Sioux Lookout and the like entire Northwestern Ontario, the 30 communities north of us, the biggest problems are staff. It's like people, these communities like just need people. The best, and they don't care what race or gender these people are. It's like if we can actually just like have a nurse or like a doctor or a teacher like fill it and or like not leave the next year, that's like game changer for so many of these places. And why was I talking about that? Can't remember why we brought it up. Oh yeah, sorry, but why can't I read it somewhere? Is just because like the places I want to read it don't have enough staff to like hold events. Yeah. The library has no people who like do that. So event maybe I will staff the library enough to hold an event or something. But yeah, that's a problem we run into all the time in like all realms of arts or any of these like social services.
Yeah. I grew up in outside a small community, and then having spent time in other small communities, as much as you said this is like regional specific, it's also just regional specific to all small communities that are outside of the hour radius of a major city. So I really appreciate you writing these poems.
Thank you for interviewing and doing the intro and everything.
We don't need to stop now, but I do want to open it up just in case there are some folks who might have some of their questions, because I feel like I could talk to you all night, but I don't know if they want that.
No, that's good. I don't know what time is done. How are you? Do you have any questions?
Oh, we're doing well for time. We do have one question that's come in from the internet.
Oh, right on. Okay.
So Laura was curious, how have you been received by the Indigenous community as a white settler poet?
Who asked it, sir?
Laura?
Laura, okay. I don't know. Say the question one more time.
Of course. How have you been received by the Indigenous community as a white settler poet?
Yeah. Not really sure at the moment. Again, like I'm not able to engage too much in my region other than this week, other than Saul started to post some of my work, and that was great. Everybody was like, oh, they said these were kind of the feedback was, oh, here's somebody who actually cares about like how Saul's being treated. If you don't know, by the way, people, Saul Mamaka is our MPP, which is like the MLA equivalent, but MPP in Ontario, and he's new. He was the first seat. They opened up, they created a new seat for our region. Sioux Lookout's the most southern part of it. And it represents all of Northwestern Ontario. So it's almost entirely Indigenous people then who are voting for that seat. That's why they wanted to do it, because it was the biggest geography, but the smallest population, but it just has such unique characteristics. They made a new political seat for it. And so Saul's been the sitting MPP since they started it. And he's great. He sees the systems that are fighting against his people and the people of our region, and he's doing stuff against it. And so I did feel like I have to do a little poetic shout out to him for it. And he's giving me great feedback as well, both just about what we're doing at the Learning Center and creatively, specifically this week as well. So good so far. Again, a lot of my stuff is about Indigenous settler relations, but like often aimed at settler side of it. And I kind of plan to continue that in my next creative works as well. Thanks for asking the question, Laura. Anybody else?
Charlene Deal was hoping that you could speak a little bit more about the title.
Sorry, who asked that? What are they doing? Yeah. Hold on. again, Laurie. So again, I'm implying that you know this. Laurie D. Graham is a poet in Canada. She wrote the book Settler Education. She's the managing editor at Brick magazine. I worked at Brick for several years in Toronto, and it was life-changing. But she was also just an incredible thinker, and helped me come up with this poem, as did all the other editors. And I don't know where the poem is. There's a poem called Probable Cause, Misjudgment of Altitude, which was one of the more like ambitious poems I ever wrote. It was pulling a lot of like source material from a bunch of films and books, and like just seeing stuff and talking to people on flights and things like that. Because small planes are really like super important in our region for getting everything everywhere. I was just telling people I just got back from Fort Severn, which is the most northern community in Ontario. I was working there for a week, and it's a different world when you think about like access to stuff, right? Everything has to come by these planes, and they're far. It's a far flight, and it's super hard to get there. Anyways, yeah, planes super important. But there's a line in this poem it's one of my favorites. It's on the bottom of page 27. That says, I read this whole thing, why not? Before takeoff, a weathered Ranger firefighter boy beside me on a bearskin flight to Thunder Bay tells how an August morning air spray bomber missed the target and dropped 1,000 gallons on him and crew. Raptor sheets of water ripping half the trees down around me. Trunks like coffins we jumped behind, popping at the peregrine arrival of 8,000 pounds. So that's the line, and a true story that a guy told me on a flight about being a firefighter. This was also just a wild job up there. So I like that line. It's always stayed in my head. And then I liked the idea of the book simultaneously trying to call out people and problems while at the same time trying to show good things that are happening. That's the idea. Yeah, thanks.
While people think a little bit longer, if they have some more questions, I actually really wanted to talk about the titles of your poems.
Right.
Oh my goodness. The titles are so important, and you have some amazing ones.
How do you pick your titles?
Honestly, it's a struggle. Just write 50 things down and then cross them out.
Yeah.
But some of your titles themselves feel like poems. And yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about that.
They are fun. You're right. Again, I don't reflect something you don't reflect on like as a whole. You're trying to create it for the one, and it's funny to look at the table of contents. So one small answer is, do you ever look at like a literary contest these days and see like what stuff makes it? They're always like really badass titles, like really, really good ones that people worked hard at. And that's a huge part of inspiration. Not so much to win an award, be like, okay, this is what poets are doing today. Like I gotta step my game up and make stuff that you remember.
So if I wanted to pay you a really like high compliment, I just need to go, Evan J, badass titles.
Badass
wow.
titles. Yeah.
Knows how to title a poem.
Freelance title consultant. Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
But I'm often, so then the actual how to get a title, I'm often pulling, like, I'm trying to think in the poem, what is I'm not necessarily thinking about like what represents the poem, with the poem very well. I'm thinking what was like one of the most beautiful lyric lines that rings well, that someone will remember, right? Less about, like, of course you do find spicy bits, isn't even from the poem. It was from, like, what was that from? It says in the back somewhere, a Flannery O'Connor story. Yeah, it was just like an awesome line in that. I thought, oh, I got it. I think it was from that. Maybe it was from something else.
When I read that title, I thought about Bartleby the Scrivener, where somebody asked, maybe Bartleby is hot and spicy.
Right.
And it was like, okay, yeah, I could see this, this collection having some Marxism in it. Perhaps that's where it's from.
Right. No, it was from James Joyce's A Little Cloud. It's when they're sitting in that bar, I think, and they're drinking before they go out, and they're talking about something. That was poignant. But I thought, oh, that's such a beautiful scene. And a bunch of other things pulled it in. But yeah, good question.
Okay. Good question. I got excited again and asked another question, so I want to open it up to the folks in our live audience as well as on YouTube. If anybody has a question, John will circulate around with a microphone.
Matthew. Oh, sorry. I was gonna call you. No, that's okay. Yeah.
The question is, how have you grown as a writer? How have you grown your craft?
Awesome question. Thank you for asking. The way I would recommend to everybody, the only like emerging writer I still talk to regularly is my brother Matthew. He's the sports editor at Manitoban. Ooh. Big deal, yeah. That was the first place I ever got anything published, was in Manitoba back in the day. The best way I find is to throw yourself into every sphere you can. I think it was like, is it Berger or no, it was the other guy. I can't remember his name. He was also part of Brick. He had like no teeth. He lived in Montana. What was his name? You like the guy, Lisa. I can't remember his name. Anyways, a writer from America. And one of his big lines, I remember him saying this, it was to like Anthony Bourdain or someone who was interviewing him. And he said, like, read everything the West has to offer, and then when you've done that, read everything in the East, which is like a problematic way of thinking of literature. But I just like the idea of like, read everything all the time you can, and like expose yourself to it. I add on this little second caveat: expose yourself to it in every way possible. Like it's so hard to be a good writer. By good writer, I mean like understanding the entire craft, what's happening contemporarily and in the past, that you really have to like jump into it in every avenue you can. And that would be how I've grown, is like started a reading series, exposed myself to like everybody I could in the region who was coming up, seeing what they're doing, like both creatively and then making relationships with them, just talking to them, seeing what they're thinking about. And then like working with literary journals, seeing what like really good writers from around the world are doing right now. And then like reading everything they've done in the past and see who was coming through there in the past. And then read everything, go to school for literature, do a master's, a PhD, and like dive in so deep that you know something incredibly well, uselessly well, right? More useless outside of academia. And then just like find literary friends, essentially expose yourself excessively. That would be how I did and plan to keep doing it. Plus you can get amazing friends and you never stop thinking, and McNally becomes like your home and all these other fun parts of it. Yeah. Awesome. Jim Harrison, yeah, that was it. Yeah. Legends of the Fall, yeah.
That was some really great advice.
Yeah. Thanks. Oh yeah, and this whole festival, like working with you guys with the festival this year, is another really good part. Yeah.
I think we have a question over yonder.
And this will be our dramatic final question.
Ooh.
So on YouTube, you can't see it. It's my brother Matthew, the big time editor. Yeah.
What is your favorite poem?
That's a stupid question, Matthew.
That was the last question too. That's what you gave us?
Yeah, come on. Yeah. What's your favorite poem? Does anything come to mind, Jess, that I'm always like, oh yeah, this is... Yeah. And sorry, yeah, good question. In my book or in the world? Oh, that's okay. That's easier to figure out. I was like, this is ridiculous. I did in the world. There's a bunch. I really enjoy everything Dion does, and I have one of the books there. But in the book is an easier question to bite off. Give me a sec. Geez, maybe it isn't. It isn't easy. Yeah, that's really tough. I do like this first poem, Blue or Young, which I'm not going to read now. I'm going to save till an event in Sudbury. I'll tell you about it why later. That was the first. That was the one that won that Ballum Award, but it was the first time I realized that I could be a decent poet, right? It was the first time somebody like said, "Oh, you're good enough to like win an award," and it was somebody who like it was Liz Howard that won the Griffin. I was like, "Oh, she actually like really likes my stuff," which means must be okay about it at it. So I enjoy that. And it was the first time I ever like really dedicated a significant amount of time to writing a poem. I was commuting, I was teaching on one side of the city and commuting home, and I would sit in the subway on the way home. Jess was working like overnights or something, and nobody at home to go back to. So I'd sit at Bloor Young Station and I just like watch people and poetically sketch lines and stuff day after day, hour after hour. And this poem came out of that. It was a cool thing to see, like, oh yeah, you could like document a space over time in a poem. It's fascinating. Yeah.
As much as I razzed you, that was an excellent question. And I even wrote down Evan's face next to it. So I wouldn't have been able to do that without your question.
Yeah. So my other side to that is I actually haven't ever met Liz Howard, but we read on the same panel in 2 weeks in Sudbury. So I get to finally say, hey, this was you. Yeah. So, yeah.
Amazing. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I'll say thank you to all of you again in person just after this. So, but obviously, thanks for coming. But to YouTubers, thank you so much. If there's any of my friends from around the world that are in there, I appreciate you tuning in. And thanks, McNally.
Fantastic conversation, wasn't it? Oh, this is such a great book. Thank you, Evan. Thank you, Teresa. One more rousing round of applause, please. I am the Charlene Deal who was being laughed at earlier, so if I haven't met you yet, I'm glad to meet you. I am the director of the Winnipeg International Writers Festival, and this is our last live event of this year's festival, and what a fantastic way to wrap things up. Thank you. It was a really terrific reading and a really interesting conversation, and it's a great demonstration, I think, about how literary writing is so pertinent and so relevant and so challenging. So I wanted to just say, Evan, that you were talking about being a good poet. Yes, I'd say yes, a very good poet. But also, I think one of the things that is so moving about your work is that the goodness of you comes through your poems. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. That's going to be all. Thank you. And I want to say a couple other things. Evan kind of referenced this, but Evan and Zoe and Kale, where are you, Zoe and Kale? There you are. These three and Teresa were our powerful quartet of readers who started reading in February and plowed through probably somewhere over 100 different submissions. So they have been our first readers. So it's a huge thanks to all four of you who kind of did the first screening. So if you've heard or watched some of the videos of some of the great writers this year, let's just do one big thanks for those four, because that was a huge job. And also, it's so cool that they actually get to meet each other in person now, because they've been Zooming for months. We do still have 2 events left to go with the festival. Tomorrow afternoon, there's a writing workshop. So if you are a interested writer, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Jenny Gunn is going to do, I can't remember the name of her workshop, but it's basically, did you want to start your novel? How come you can't start your novel? Here's how you start your novel. That's not her actual title, but hey, that's my paraphrase. It's on Zoom, and you can register through Eventbrite. And you can find the link at our festival website, which is thinairfestival.ca. And then in the evening, we're going to do a show called Celebrating Manitoba Books, which is recognizing the winners of this year's Manitoba Book Awards. That also is via Zoom, and you can get there through the Eventbrite platform or through that thinairfestival.ca website. It'd be great to see all of you there. And if you haven't already been prowling around on that website, there's tons and tons and tons of videos that our writers have contributed, and they are everything imaginable. Really wonderful readings, conversations, and a few interesting things like cooking demos and a wig making demonstration and stuff that's kind of about the books. It's been a very interesting thing to see kind of how writers present their own, so think about their own books and how they want you to know about them. So please do spend some time there. It's going to shut down on Monday. And thanks to Marge, it's going to be shut down in the evening on Monday, because she's not as tired as the rest of us. because she's special. Before we go, there's a couple things you need to know. One is that Evan has to be spirited out of here first. Two, you have to buy the book before you can leave the store. They do it like that here. Evan will sign until his arm falls off, and probably he'd like you to buy 2, 3, 4 copies, as would the bookstore. But I also do want to pause to say that this McNally Robinson has been an extraordinary host. This is, I think, our 9th event here, and we have one more virtual event coming up in early November with Ian Williams, who is written a book called Disorientation on Being Black in Canada. A brilliant book and a really, really superb person. Kind of good, like Evan is good, you know, like a good writer, but also, you know, good. So that's, you can find out how to get there through the McNally website. This is the 40th anniversary of this store, which in itself is an extraordinary accomplishment, and the 25th year here in this space. So I would like to do one huge shout out to McNally Robinson for being this core of our community and a place for us to gather and share ideas and think, and sometimes to welcome a new poet a few years ago as a green one, as part of the process of becoming ourselves as thinkers and writers. And a big thanks to John, who runs around and makes everything look very simple and has like the voice that we all want. And Angela and Chris, who make the store run. So let's have a big round of applause for McNally. Now the rule is you have to sit tight until Evan is whisked away to the signing desk, which is right near the cash desk. So thank you all for coming tonight. One more round for Evan as he makes his run. Woo!